You know, some stories are just so incredible, they feel like they have to be fiction. This is one of those. It's a story about a man, a single samurai, who could see a tidal wave coming while his entire nation had its back to the ocean.
So, how do you do it? How does one person manage to wake up an entire country that's been intentionally snoozing for 2 whole centuries? Sounds impossible, right? Well, it actually happened. And the story starts with this one key policy: Sakoku.
Okay, so you really have to picture this. For over 200 years, while Europe is just exploding with the Industrial Revolution, we're talking steam engines, factories, massive global change, Japan is locked down. On purpose. The samurai government basically put up a giant "do not disturb" sign for the rest of the world. Nobody in, nobody out. It was like a society perfectly preserved in amber.
But, and this is crucial, in this massive wall of isolation, there was one tiny little crack, a peephole to the outside world. It was a very small man-made island called Dejima. And this was it. This was Japan's only connection to the rapidly changing West.
And guess who happens to be born right next to this little window? Our guy, Takashima Shuhan. So while almost everyone else is living in this isolated bubble, he's growing up seeing things that would blow their minds. He's seeing huge European ships, foreign traders, and the one thing that really captures his attention? Their cannons, these massive modern pieces of artillery. And that sight, well, it was going to define his entire life.
So yeah, you can imagine this wasn't just some casual interest for him. It became an absolute obsession. He could see the future hurtling towards Japan, and he just knew that his country was completely unprepared for what was coming. So he makes it his personal mission to understand this new technology.
And this is where it gets wild. Look at his dedication. He doesn't just watch from a distance. Nope, he dives in head first. He teaches himself Dutch, not to read poetry, but to pore over dense technical manuals on artillery. Then he takes his own money, which was unheard of, to buy European cannons and guns. And he doesn't just polish them. He takes them apart, piece by bloody piece, just to figure out how they tick. For a government official back then, this was, well, it was kind of nuts.
And this quote right here, it just nails it. This tells you everything about what was driving him. This wasn't some hobby. He felt it in his gut. He believed Japan was fast asleep, walking straight towards a cliff, and if somebody didn't wake them up, and wake them up soon, they were all going to go right over the edge.
For years, this was just his private obsession. But then, an event on the world stage, far away, is going to give him the chance to take his private warning and make it very, very public. He's about to fire a warning shot that's going to be heard all the way in the capital. That news comes filtering through Dejima, the First Opium War. Great Britain, with its modern industrial navy, has just steamrolled China. Now you have to understand, China was seen as the undisputed giant of Asia. So for Japan, this news was an absolute shockwave. The thinking was, if mighty China couldn't stand up to these Westerners, what hope did Japan have? This was it. This was the nightmare scenario Shuhan had been warning about.
So what does Shuhan do? He seizes the moment. He writes this incredibly blunt memo straight to the top, to the shogunate. He's basically saying, hey, are you guys watching? Look what just happened to China. That is our future, unless we get our act together right now. It was so direct, so impossible to ignore, that for the first time, the powers that be actually had to listen. And this leads to one of the most incredible scenes in Japanese history. The government summons him to Edo, modern-day Tokyo, and tells him, okay, show us what you've got. So just try to picture it. You've got all these high-ranking samurai officials, men whose entire world is built on swords and honor, standing on a field, and they're watching Shuhan's troops in disciplined formation, firing modern rifles and coordinated volleys, while Western-style cannons are just roaring. The accounts say their jaws were on the floor. They were just completely and utterly stunned.
But here's where you see the huge gap in understanding. Shuhan is literally showing them the difference between national survival and total defeat. He's demonstrating how to fight a modern war. And what does one of the top officials write down in his diary? He comments on the soldiers' bizarre headgear. Their hats. I mean, come on. It just perfectly captures how out of touch the establishment really was.
So you'd think this would be his big "I told you so" moment, right? The demonstration is a huge success, the government adopts his methods, he's a national hero. But here's the twist. In the rigid political world of the shogunate, being this right and this successful can make you a very big target.
And that's because his sudden fame puts him on a collision course with this other guy, a really powerful official named Tori Yozo. Now, Tori is the absolute embodiment of the old guard. He thinks all this Western knowledge is basically poison. In fact, he'd already led a crackdown, throwing scholars in jail just for studying it. So when he looks at Shuhan, he doesn't see a savior, he sees the ultimate threat.
And it happens fast. Just 1 year, after being hailed as a hero, Shuhan is arrested. The official charges? Some bogus financial mismanagement claim. But everybody knew it was a political hit job, orchestrated by Tory. There's no real trial, no chance to defend himself. He's stripped of his rank, sentenced to house arrest in the middle of nowhere, and they even officially erase his entire family line. Just gone. The man who saw the future is silenced and locked away.
But, history has a funny way of settling scores. For 11 long years, Shuhan is just gone, stuck under house arrest, reading, studying. And then, one day, in 1853, the future he predicted stops being a prediction. It doesn't knock politely on the door, it comes steaming right into Edo Bay.
4 of them. The Japanese called them Kurofune, the black ships. And you have to understand how utterly alien and terrifying this sight was. They were huge, painted black, and they were steam-powered. They belched out this thick black smoke, and this is the part that freaked everyone out. They moved against the wind. It looked like magic. It looked unnatural. These weren't just ships, they were monsters.
The entire country just panicked. These were the very ships from the stories, the ones that had brought China to its knees. Now they were here, their cannons aimed right at the shore. The samurai guards on the coast could do nothing. The morning of no return that Shuhan had warned about, it had finally dawned.
And in that moment of absolute crisis, with the nation in a complete state of terror, who do you think the government suddenly remembers? Yep, the one guy who told them this was going to happen, the very man they threw in prison for it. After 11 years of being locked away, Takashima Shuhan was a free man. His vindication was absolute.
As soon as he's free, his advice is clear. Don't fight. You can't win. Open the country. But his story doesn't end there. In fact, his real legacy, the part that's truly amazing, is found in these little echoes from his work that you can still find in Japan today.
Okay, get this. This is so cool. If you go to a Japanese school today, you'll hear the command Kyotsuke, which means attention. Well, where does that come from? It traces directly back to Shuhan. He learned the military commands in Dutch for his big drill, his students translated them into Japanese, and those words just stuck. They became part of the language for the military and eventually even schools.
And his legacy is literally etched onto the map of modern Tokyo. Remember that field where he held the historic demonstration, Tokomarigara? Well, if you look on a map of Tokyo today, you'll find a whole neighborhood there called Takashima Daira. They named it after him. His name is part of the city, a permanent tribute to the man whose cannon fire echoed into the future. So, what happens when one person's conviction is so strong it can outlast a prison sentence? It becomes something more. It becomes the first defiant heartbeat of a nation that's just starting to wake up. Shuhan's lonely, obsessive quest wasn't just about being proven right in the end. It was the spark, the first crucial spark that ignited Japan's incredible, breathtakingly rapid transformation into the modern world.